think we're good.
All right. I'll do an introduction. We're good? Okay, we're back from for this afternoon's session. This next hour, we're going to be talking about Nextdoor. For those of you who are not aware, I'm sure they'll explain everything as to what Nextdoor is. We here in Phoenix use Nextdoor. We think it's a great way to communicate with your neighborhood groups. And again, they will be here to explain a lot more about Nextdoor. First, I'd like to introduce Joseph Porcelli. He is known as the professional neighbor. He will likely give us more explanation as to what that means. Originating out of Boston, and then is now in San Francisco, I believe.
Actually, I was based in San Francisco, but I live in DC.
Oh, there we go, something like that. So he's going to give us some information on Nextdoor, as is Officer Peter Gillis, who is from Braintree Police Department, which is just outside of Boston. And so we will use a translator for him as he speaks, so that you guys can all understand what he's saying. So please help me welcome both Officer Peter Gillis and Joseph Porcelli.
I just want to have a disclaimer.
He just said I would like to make a disclaimer.
I'm going to do my best to pronounce my R's, but once I get going, I might be saying wicked, car, park. I looked up Google Translate. There is no option for Boston, so I'll do the best I can.
All right, so lunch was wicked good, wasn't it, kid?
It was awesome.
All right. So thanks, everyone, for your attention. We're going to talk about Nextdoor today, but we're going to frame it from the perspective as a 21st century community policing engagement strategy. I'm going to talk about the kind of residential side of Nextdoor, and then Pete's going to talk about the perspective of Nextdoor from a law enforcement agency, but focusing on neighborhood-specific engagement. So a lot of the conversations that we've heard earlier today, do I need to be somewhere so that it films it, or are you good? Okay. The conversations earlier today have been kind of on the macro level strategy, and there's been a lot of great insight, strategies, and tactics. So where I'm inviting you to listen from is, how do you communicate and engage with neighbors in the neighborhood who you want to understand what's happening, but take actions and change behaviors that will reduce Part 1 crime? Okay, so that's sort of the context to listen to our presentation from. So what we're thinking about here is we'll just tell you briefly a little bit more about ourselves, and we're going to share what we call an engagement formula, and then tell you a little bit about Nextdoor. And then there's something that's different from Nextdoor that you may use in your neighborhood called Nextdoor for public agencies. And Phoenix, Tucson, around here, and about 740 other agencies throughout the country are already using this platform. And then we're going to go into, if we have some time, that's great, specific strategies and that will help you kind of build community and drive engagement, but also some objectives that you would measure along the way to track the progress that you're making. So let's go ahead here. Pete, you want to just say a couple more words about yourself and your experience here?
Sure. I've been a police officer for 8 years. I started out in patrol. I'm now in community policing. I created Braintree social media. Braintree, we've got about 85 offices for 15 square miles, residents are about 35,000. I'm also a member of a regional computer crime unit as a forensic investigator. And also before that, I was a combat veteran with the U.S. Army.
Thanks, Pete. Did everyone understand what he said? All right, just checking. So my background is actually where I got the nickname Professional Neighbors, because I started organizing in my neighborhood when two of my buddies, one who was a big guy like me, was violently assaulted walking home. And what I did is I brought my neighbors together in Boston, and we just started doing things together and getting to know each other. And over the course of a couple of years, Part 1 crime dropped. I got a call from Boston Police in the neighborhood watch unit. They're like, we don't know what you did in your neighborhood, but you want to come do it in the rest of the city of Boston? And I'm like, sure, that sounds pretty fun. And so I went to Boston PD, and at the same time was starting a nonprofit called Neighbors for Neighbors. And essentially what we did is we helped neighbors meet each other in social ways. Like we had neighborhood socials they would play. They'd start different sports groups together and do community projects together, which kind of made a whole bunch of disconnected people in a neighborhood that was rapidly changing have a way to be connected and communicate. So when crime came up in the neighborhood, all these neighbors could be mobilized, and they would work with the police, and they know their local community police officers, and things turned around pretty quickly when we organized and mobilized. That work led me to, as you know, Boston Police, and after starting a social networking project at Boston Police that connected neighbors to police officers back in 2007. Homeland Security, actually here in this area, had a social network called Our Border, which was around border affairs. I ran that for Secretary Napolitano and Commissioner Burson, which led me to another company called GovDelivery, which did more community things. But I was doing things at the federal level, and I miss kind of doing the work on the neighborhood level. So Nextdoor allows me to work with great guys like Pete, and you'll learn more about our partnership, but support folks like you with the rest of my team to help you build community and reduce Part 1 crime in your neighborhoods. So, all right. So we're going to kind of do this together. I'm going to set it up, and Pete's going to add some comments, but wanted to provide some, like, a context. How do you think about engaging people in the neighborhoods where you live, right? How do you think about helping build community, but how do you build relationships between your agency and the community? And the first thing you need is connection, right? You've got to be connected. You have to shake a hand. You have to be able to communicate with people. And we've talked about that today from that macro level, right? Facebook, Twitter, being able to reach kind of your masses. But when you have that, you also need to think about what happens down at the neighborhood level, because those one-to-one relationships are where a lot of the information gets passed on to you folks, right? And again, that's the place to listen to. So you've got connection, you have channels to communicate, so Twitter and Facebook for your macro, Nextdoor for your neighborhood, but then what? You gotta have information, right? And so we think about data, big data that's going on all over the country right now, but when you have that data and you don't have context, what does it mean? So if someone looks at a crime report and they see a bunch of burglaries, is that normal? Should they do something about it? You need to also add some direction, right? So you have to have collaborative action. So you get that information, you add some of the direction. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we need you to do, right? Hey, an arrest was made. Like, because of some of the information you passed on, thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Neighbors, we were able to make this critical arrest and make things happen. Want to just make the comments on what you've seen?
What I've seen is, specifically in my town, neighbors that know each other look out for one another. When we were starting up Nextdoor, I live in the community that I work in, and I've got a good working relationship with my neighbors because I know them. If you look at other neighborhoods, people coming and going, they don't know who lives next door to them. And this is a huge platform where people can get to know each other, aside from knocking on the door with some brownies saying, hey, neighbor, you know what I mean? So
I like brownies, I can't tell. So, but those kinds of very simple things are what makes the difference, right? If you think about, like, what do you wish people in neighborhoods would do? You want them to connect and know each other, right? So this is just a framework to think about, and it can be kind of applied and tweaked in lots of different ways. But the results here are the things that we really care about. We want to prevent and reduce crime, right? You want to reduce crime. I mean, you also want to increase the number of relationships and trust, right? That's a very important topic, especially given what we're seeing around the country and in Baltimore right now. And at the same time, you also want to be able to reduce complaints that are coming in. And those kind of personal one-on-one relationships that officers have with residents, instead of just telling your story, the community tells your story based on the positive experiences they've had with you at the local neighborhood level as well. All right, let's keep going here. So I'm going to take a little bit and tell you about Nextdoor from the residential perspective. Remember, there's two platforms. There's Nextdoor for residents and Nextdoor for public agencies. And by the way, I'm just going to introduce Justine real quick, who's my associate, who's in the back, and she's also happy to talk to you over the course of the conference here. But Nextdoor is the free and private social network for neighborhoods. And every member in Nextdoor has to first verify their address, and they use their real first and last name. And every single neighborhood of Nextdoor, and there's been 57,000 started around the country, about 1 in 3 neighborhoods in the US are now using this platform. They have to verify their address, and they have to start their own neighborhood, and they use their real first and last names, like I said. So that sort of changes the conversation, right? So I join and Pete's in my neighborhood here. I'm like, hey neighbor, how you doing? I actually know he lives in my neighborhood. And because the network's private, the stuff we talk about, you can't Google or see, right? And even from the agency perspective, you guys post in from Nextdoor for public agencies, you can't see our conversations. We can just see what's coming in from you. So it really is private. And we'll talk about kind of everyday things. Let's go to the next slide. So what are people talking about on Nextdoor? The most prevalent conversations is about recommendations. Anybody ever needed a babysitter, a roofer, a plumber, trying to sell a bike, give away a shelf, or that crap in your garage, you want to organize a garage sale? Neighbors use it all the time for these purposes, right? And they love it because it's super useful. And Nextdoor is also started by neighbors, but it's also managed by neighbors, and it grows organically because it's so useful. So here in Phoenix, for example, I think there's like 200 neighborhoods, Justine, off the top of your head? You know, folks from Phoenix, how many neighborhoods do you have? On 180. Oh, my bad. 580. In Massachusetts, at 580. Okay? And that was supposed to be a joke. My bad. So anyway, sorry, Pete.
It's okay.
Sorry. So anyway, like the neighbors did that work, but Phoenix PD gets to post into all these neighborhoods because all these neighbors are talking about these things. We're like, oh, there's crime in my neighborhood, now you should do these things. Good to know. Thank you for being proactive. What should we do about it? And that direction gets given. Let's go, next slide here. So the other side of Nextdoor too, and we see this in neighborhoods where they're facing some more challenging kind of economic circumstances, is Nextdoor also becomes the lifeline of the neighborhood where neighbors share resources with each other to help keep their families healthy and safe. Job opportunities, those kinds of things, right? So it can be the kind of fun, helpful things, but crucial and essential things that help neighborhoods get stronger, right? And leverage neighbors as assets to kind of help each other deal with some of the challenges they're facing. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Pete, who's gonna talk about kind of the perspective of Nextdoor for public agencies, and he's gonna give you an overview of that. And then we'll give you a demo of what it actually looks like and how they use it in Braintree.
All right, before I get into this right here, I'm just going to mention a few things. One thing I like about Nextdoor is I know when I post things, I'm talking to the residents of my town. I have 8,000 Twitter followers on the police department page and 3,000 Facebook followers. I don't know who they are, you know, and Nextdoor lets me be specific about crime or maybe give a little bit more information about an incident or something that if I had done that on Facebook, I'd have, you know, channels 4, 5, 7 calling my chief wanting a press release. Another thing I like about Nextdoor, and I'm speaking as a resident of my town, and older people, not so much, maybe even the elderly, they have computers, they're on the internet. They're not really on Facebook or Twitter though, because they're older. No offense to anybody that's old. My neighbor is 91 years old. 91 years old. He doesn't even know what Facebook is. But two or 3 days into launching Nextdoor, I got a message from him on Nextdoor thanking me, saying this is going to be a great thing. And I was like, we're targeting a different audience that we necessarily wouldn't have engaged with just the 2 social media platforms that we currently run. So some of the things that the police department, me specifically, what I post, safety tips. 90% of the car break-ins in my town are from unlocked vehicles. So I'll blast out a thing saying, hey, listen, we had a bunch of car breaks over, you know, in this neighborhood. Lock your cars, lock your doors. Public events. We do a national night out every year. I'll throw that up there, National Night Out. My town, if there's road races, I put it up there so that people in my town know, hey, listen, from 9:30 to noon on Saturday, expect these roads to be closed because there's a charity road race. Service closures. My town, we have what's called a 100 Roads program. We're replacing every road in town over the span of 5 to 10 years. When there's big construction going on, I put out on Nextdoor the specific town, the specific street in the neighborhood saying, listen, be advised that from this date to this date, you guys are gonna, need to do, detours or expect some delays getting into your neighborhood. Now the weather thing is big. We launched in December of this year, and I don't know if you know this, but the Boston area got 110 inches of snow this winter. 110. It was crazy. Nextdoor became basically a lifeline between the town of Braintree and the police departments. Neighbors were literally stranded on their streets, in their homes. They couldn't get out. There was 3 feet of snow on the ground. At one point, then there was 6. So putting out, basically what's going on with the snow, emergencies, school closings. The townspeople were messaging me and the chief saying, listen, this is the street that I live on. It hasn't been done yet. We take that information and call the DPW directly and be like, look, These streets, you know, they need to be hit now. There are people stranded. I haven't really done anything about missing or wanted persons, but we all know in social media, what happens when we post something about a lost or found dog? People go crazy, right? Just last week, came home from working an overtime shift, and there was a black lab in my driveway. Not my black lab. So I took a picture of it, and aside from putting it up on our other social media accounts, I put it on Nextdoor, and I did it in my specific neighborhood. I found the owner in like 20 minutes. With the real-time crime alerts, I reserve that for big stuff because most people that have signed up for Nextdoor, they don't want their phone going off every 2 seconds. That, you know, from me posting, from the chief posting, or whoever. They set it up so that they can receive an email alert if Officer Gillis has just posted on Nextdoor. However, they can get a text alert if there's something big going on. Next slide. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you real quick a post. And one thing I forgot to mention, when I do stuff on Facebook, we usually get some comments, you know. I've found that with Nextdoor, the two-way communication between the police and residents is crazy. And we all know that effective social media is two-way communication. So right here, this is the agency page. This is what it looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a post. Somebody messaged me.
Look on, you might have opened that screen based on how we have it.
Okay. So right here, you really can't see, it's hard to read. I can choose where I want my post to go. Now there are 16 neighborhoods in the town of Braintree. I can choose the entire service area, which is, if I post this, every single neighborhood is going to get it. Or I can target specific neighborhoods. If there's one neighborhood that had a rash of car break-ins over the night, say, 10 or 15 cars got broken into, I may throw it out to the entire service area, the whole town, but at the very least, I'm just going to target that specific neighborhood. We had some house breaks, 3 specifically on one street. It was like between 8 and 10 a.m. in the morning. I put out a post to just that neighborhood where that street was on, and it essentially just let them know that, hey, 3 of your neighbors' homes are broken into, B, when it was, C, if you were out walking your dog, if you're going for a run, or if you're just, backing out of your car, your driveway in your car to go to work, if you saw anything suspicious, let us know.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So there's also something there that says specific service areas. So in Phoenix, for example, where they have 400 million neighborhoods, or 580 or whatever it was, picking neighborhoods would be time consuming because there's so many. So you can actually post into precincts, districts, police service areas, however you want to slice it and dice it. So the neighborhoods that you'll see here from Pete in a couple seconds are neighbor-defined neighborhoods, but you can also communicate into agency-defined areas as you deem appropriate.
Okay, so what I'm doing right here is I'm just going to send out a post. Did anyone here use crime reports? Okay. We use crime reports, and what I did earlier is I took a screenshot of basically 30 days worth of incidents in Braintree, and I'm going to throw it up here with just a post essentially saying that check out the 30-day stats for crime in Braintree. The weather's getting warmer. Please look out for your neighbors. With warmer weather comes more criminal activity because, well, where I live, criminals aren't going to walk around at night breaking into stuff when it's 2 degrees out. So if you want to just add a couple things,
Sure. So I'm just going to recap some of the things that distinguish, while Pete's typing this up here, Nextdoor from, say, Facebook or Twitter. Every Nextdoor member is a verified resident of a specific neighborhood. They use their first and real last name. That means that the quality and type of conversations will be different because they've joined the platform because they want to contribute to the community, be a part of it, and make it better. With Nextdoor for public agencies, you can target messages into neighbor-defined neighborhoods. It could be one, many, or all, and you'll see that here in a second when Pete finishes typing here. Secondly, you can also communicate into your agency-defined areas like I talk about. I mentioned earlier, when you post into Nextdoor as an agency, you can't actually see the conversations that the members are having, and there's two reasons for that. One, Nextdoor is the private social network for neighborhoods, so it's private to the neighbors that live there. Now, Pete has two accounts because he lives in Braintree, his personal one, and then one for his public agency interface here. But when he uses Nextdoor for public agencies, he can post it to all neighborhoods, which you can't as a member, right? Because you live in your neighborhood. There's a feature that allows you to share things with nearby neighborhoods, but that's typically a small circumference compared to all the neighborhoods in your area. But neighbors can thank posts. They can reply to your posts if you want that to happen. You can actually have it so there's no discussions. Maybe you just need to push something out and there's something serious going on. You don't have time for that, or it may not be appropriate. You get to make those choices. But neighbors can also send private messages. So they may have some information, Pete could post like, hey, we're looking for a certain type of suspect here. If you have any information, leave a reply or give me a call, whatever. And I may not be comfortable, putting something out there, but I'll send Pete a private message, be like, hey, I actually saw something and I wanted to discuss that with you. What's the best number to reach you, or something along those lines. So there's different ways of communication to the platform depending on people's preferences or kind of how you want them to interact with you.
All right, so I just posted, but I stopped right here. I posted on the entire service area for my town. You're gonna get to this screen right here. Once you post, you have the option to put it on Facebook or Twitter. And it's really seamless. And it's one feature I like to do because it also not only puts it, I can do one post and then just hit Facebook, Twitter, and just covered all my bases. Your Facebook followers and your Twitter followers that don't necessarily know about Nextdoor, but they live in your town or community, they're going to see that this came from this thing called Nextdoor, and it's going to stop the wheels turning. So
just remember, you're not connected, so it won't work right now.
I'm sorry?
You're not connected to Facebook or Twitter because it's
No.
on my computer. Yeah. So go ahead and click done here. And so let's show them what that post looks like. Yeah. There you go. So this is, again, the agency interface. Pete can see this because he's logged in, and all your authorized users at your agency can see this. And by the way, you can also limit authorized users to post in those certain sectors or areas we talked about earlier. So, Pete can post in the entire jurisdiction, but here in Phoenix, they actually have it aligned to the different districts that they have. And if we have time at the end of the presentation, we'll show you what that looks like. You want to just go back to that real quick?
Yep.
There you go. If you scroll down, let's show folks what some of your posts look like here.
Okay, so 3 days ago, we had a road race in town. So I threw it up on Nextdoor with an actual map of the route, just to be, let people know that these roads are going to be closed for this charity road race. You can see right here that we received 4 replies regarding the road race. People were asking about specific roads, when they're going to be closed, and my chief chimed in and basically said, hey, this is a new route for this annual race, so the officers are going to be making adjustments on the fly. I feel like Nextdoor is a lot more, has the ability to be a little bit more informal with your community. My chief is really big in posting commendations of different offices, stuff that we did. We post recent criminal activity. This right here, annual mosquito spraying. I actually was a little bit late putting this up. There was a doing like aerial spraying, and people were looking for this information because once I posted, people were like, yeah, well, finally, but you can't be perfect all the time. How do we get this?
Yeah. Any questions about what you saw there? Anything not clear that you'd like us to clarify based on that posting process? One thing I will say is that anyone who is a member of Nextdoor automatically gets your messages. So, if you have, 300, 10,000, 50,000 people in your area or jurisdiction, as a member, they'll automatically get that from you, so they don't have to subscribe.
All right, so I want to talk about how do we get people to join Nextdoor. When I started working with Joseph, I had nobody, no neighborhoods established. You got to kind of think outside the box on this one, because just posting it on Twitter and Facebook saying, hey, join Nextdoor, you'll get some, but it's not going to get the followers that you want. So these are some examples. You can host a press conference. You can send out mass mailers. One thing I did for my town electric light department puts out their quarterly bill or whatnot. I had them stick a flyer in it to join Nextdoor. I instructed offices on calls. If you found the opportunity or you thought it was appropriate when you're on a call for whatever it may be, tell the resident, hey, did you hear about Nextdoor? Do you know anything about it? Check it out. We have many condo type communities or groups like apartments and stuff. I met with the management and basically explained to them what Nextdoor was, because condo complexes, they're essentially their own neighborhood. So I meet with management, sit down, tell them about Nextdoor. They put it out because every condo association or management company has a mass email list of all their tenants. I had them put it out in a mass email, hey, the Braintree Police wants you to join Nextdoor. I went to all the buildings, the common areas, I put up flyers. So you got to think outside the box and how to engage the entire town and make them aware. Being in community policing, I've attended community meetings that I've talked about Nextdoor. Basically, anytime I'm up talking in front of a bunch of people in my town, I somehow mention Nextdoor. It's something I'm a lot more passionate about Nextdoor than Twitter and Facebook, mainly because I feel that it really opens up that communication channel between the community and the police department. Yep. All right, so the press conference, what I did was, Joe and I got rolling with Nextdoor. I started putting it out, getting the word out, and building up neighborhoods. And then once we had, a month or so worth of putting the word out, Joe came up to Massachusetts. We held a press conference, and we exploded with followers. The news came, they covered it. We posted it up on our social media accounts, and it really did help. It basically is like the big kickoff for Nextdoor.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Pete before we move on here? All right. So what we want to offer next, so if you recall the community policing engagement formula, you have connection, communication, collaborative action, information sharing, and then kind of celebration, right? Because you have to acknowledge the progress that you've made and the contributions that everyone's kind of worked on together. And these strategies here are kind of they're a collection of strategies that our partners have done around the country. They're some of our own experience, but they're meant to be kind of like a holistic way of looking at how do we actually build community and how can we do that in a very kind of proactive way that's holistic, right? So when we've come up with these kind of 5 strategies, right? And so the first one is to inform and educate, as well as recommend actions for residents to take to deter and reduce and help solve crimes, right? So that comes back to the point I made earlier, right? So what's happening in your neighborhood, data, right? And then what's the context? Is that normal? Is it high? Is it low? And then what are we doing about it, and what can you do about it, right? So when you inform, you educate, and you recommend actions to take. And I think if you look at the majority of kind of social media feeds from a lot of agencies, there's great storytelling, doing an awesome job kind of branding and showing that you care and being personable and all the great insights we heard earlier. But I believe there's a major opportunity here to kind of use that data, context, and education to have people realize, so if you're seeing an increase in theft from vehicles in your neighborhood, yes, you need to take your valuables out of your car, but people will break into cars for things that aren't super valuable, that people don't consider valuable, like car chargers, loose change, recyclables, right? Those are things we have heard that drive this, right? And there's other things people can do, like make sure that even if there's just a jacket on your back seat, someone may think that there's something underneath that jacket's of value that's going to drive the car from being broken into, right? You also need to share this information with your neighbors so they understand it, because you need the majority of people actively practicing crime prevention to kind of reduce that fuel that would drive, crime in the neighborhood. So that's sort of the first strategy here. Pete, do you have any comments to that? Did I cover that already?
No, you covered it.
All right. So you saw when Pete talked earlier is you want to leverage points of contact to kind of grow your membership, right? So Pete talked about how they're doing that for Nextdoor, the press conference, the community meetings. One of the tips that I give folks who are using Nextdoor is you can just sign into the Nextdoor for Public Agencies app on your phone, or not the app, excuse me, into the responsive website, and you can just click invite and then just pass your phone around, have people type in their email addresses, and then at the end of that meeting, you just hit send. You don't have to type any of that up. Save you lots of time. That'll grow your membership as well. But there's lots of other opportunities too, right? People walk into your stations, and people are pretty good about promoting kind of like Facebook and Twitter, like on cars and that kind of stuff. But it's an active conversation that I think happens all the time. So leverage every point of contact to kind of grow your membership there to increase your engagement. Am I good there? All right, we forgot a couple. Go back one side. And then number 3 here is encourage and empower residents to build community in fun and social ways. So one of the things I did in my neighborhood in Boston is I had neighborhood socials. We just picked like a local restaurant, and once a month from Tuesday, like 7 to 8:30, neighbors got together, had a bite to eat, shared chips and salsa, maybe a beer, and just got to know each other. And people really like that, especially like in a neighborhood that, actually works in every neighborhood I've been in, frankly, right? That's one of those examples. I live in a building in Washington, D.C., where on my floor, the floor changes like every 6 months to a year. So my wife and I host coffee hours on Saturday mornings once a quarter, just so the new neighbors kind of get plugged in and meet each other. That's easy, right? And this may sound kind of like, happy neighborhoody thing, but if it's something that comes from you folks say, here's some great ways you can build community, it can look like lots of different things, right? It can be like plant a community garden, do a cleanup, do a block party. But these are all things that help those neighbors come together. And when they come together on there, and they're also on Nextdoor, you can message them through that platform. Engage vulnerable population in meaningful ways. So there's things you can do like neighborhood walks or prayer walks and other things. And it's just important to think about this holistically, right? Because you're in a position to encourage people to take these actions that build and strengthen the community, which increases the number of people who know each other, but also know you folks. And then number 5 is engage other agencies to participate. So we're talking about Nextdoor for Public Agencies, for example, from a law enforcement perspective, but City Hall, health services, utilities, school departments can actually also use this. And you can also share their information, and you can do that on Nextdoor, Facebook, and Twitter, because you want people to get things that help them from the bottom up as well. So just kind of like a big picture thing. Did I miss anything there, Pete?
No, I don't think it.
Any questions on this? Okay, let's go to the next one. How are we doing on time? What's the timer say? Somebody tell me what time it is. Okay,
I
good.
just totally did something wrong.
Yeah, we're good. All right.
Well,
so this is kind of getting into, so how do you know if you're making progress, right? And this applies to like all different platforms here. And this objective here is you want to increase, again, coming back to the community engagement formula. And I'm going to publish this on SlideShare later, so don't feel like you have to scramble a whole bunch of notes and go nuts. I'll tweet it out and I'll hit the hashtag. But increasing connection, communication, and information sharing. How do you measure that progress? So some of the things we've come up with here are increase the number of residents who, for example, are connected in communication with each other, right? And that Facebook and Twitter, I'm going to just tout Nextdoor flat out, so I'm going to just call myself out on this. Nextdoor and Twitter don't really help neighbor-to-neighbor connection in neighborhoods. Nextdoor really has an awesome place in doing that, right? Did we lose our presentation?
we did.
Oh, awesome. One sec.
I want to fix that.
Say something smart.
Oh, wicked smart. Anyway, so some of the questions that people gave me when I was trying to promote Nextdoor, and some of were my own neighbors. Some of the things people were like, well, why do I want another social media thing to have to check? And through the verification process, one of the options for residents to verify who they are is to provide a cell phone number or their credit card information. It's to verify, and I explain this to people, it's to verify that the person that's saying that they're Susie Johnson at 420 Main Street, that's who they are. It's to deter, the fake profile accounts, the internet trolls.
Can I just provide a point of clarification there real quick? So there are a number of different ways to verify. You can have a postcard sent to your home. You can have your system call your cell phone or your home phone. If that matches your billing address, you get it let in. You can also elect. It is not required. Just stress it is not required to share credit card information. But if it just checks against your billing address, and then you can also get let in.
Right.
And also there's a way to use LexisNexis against public information. And if your name, email address, and address match, you also get let in. Okay, thank you.
We're good.
So we're going to switch gears again here and just kind of come back to this slide here. The basic thing is you want to increase the number of residents basically that are connected in communication with each other, with you folks, right? And that receive messages from you. And you can get some of those metrics, by, Twitter followers and Facebook fans. But I encourage you, as Lori talked about earlier, look at kind of what your engagement rates are, right? Like, are you actually reaching 300,000 followers, or your 10,000 followers, or your 5,000, right? So Twitter and Facebook, for example, unless you have like an unlimited budget, want you to pay to promote your tweets to reach all those folks. So that's just a consideration. Nextdoor, on the other hand, if you post to the platform, shows up on the web, shows up on our app, and gets distributed out to email. So you're going to see higher engagement rates on our platform. And then this point, I think, has access to factual information, right? So neighbors know each other, they know you, but are they getting that information that really about what's happening in their neighborhood? Not just something to think about in general. And then the number of neighbors that are submitting tips to you folks. Like, do you know how many tips are coming in from each of your channels? I did a project a couple years ago with the county out in Minnesota, and they actually weren't like we don't actually know this. But if you can increase those number of tips, that's another metric to track. And of course, at the end here, you want to reduce complaints that come into the department. I'm just going to stay here because it's easier in case it goes down. So I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but kind of these are collaborative and celebratory kind of metrics you might want to track. But like, are people attending your meetings? Are they registering for your different programs, right? And you want to track to see if there's an increase in that. The other thing is you can look at is where is the source? Where are people coming from? And then just kind of as a tip here, and I'll tweet this out later too, you can use something called custom Google URLs to track where people are landing on a web page from if you have access to Google Analytics. So if you have a web page where you have a registration form to sign up for a neighborhood watch program, you can see how many of those folks are coming from Twitter or Facebook, for example. And then I'll continue. Just to kind of wrap up here, and this is a sales part, so I'm just going to say exactly what it is. I like to be taking off my strategy hat and putting on my Nextdoor hat here, is you've got 740 agencies around the country that are already using Nextdoor, right? It's in 58,000, neighborhoods. And your neighbors are, most likely, your residents are already talking about crime, and you can be a part of that conversation. It's free for you, it's free for them. There's no contract, there's no MOU, just get up, start using it. I want to ask, well, how do you folks afford to do that? We're currently backed by venture capital, which allows us to operate and kind of sustain ourselves as we work through our kind of monetization strategy. And essentially, if you think about on Nextdoor, 26% of our conversations are about recommendations. We think we can play in that space where connecting residents to local businesses who will kind of help them, fix their plumbing or fix their roofing issue or whatever, is how we'll probably sustain ourselves over time. So to get started, all you got to do is go to nextdoor.com/agency, and you can apply to create an account for your agency, and myself and Justine can answer any questions.
Yeah, just in closing, one thing that I tell my residents, that the residents in your community, they're the eyes and ears of the community. The police can only patrol so much and stop so much crime, but all these people living there, day in and day out, they're the real ones that can help deter crime or report it and see things. And Nextdoor really has benefited us in solving crimes and essentially deterring crimes.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you, everyone.